In October 1918, American cities ran out of coffins. They ran out of grave diggers. They ran out of hospital beds, nurses, and hope. The deadliest virus in modern history was killing people in hours. A perfectly healthy 25-year-old soldier could eat breakfast at 7 a.m. feeling absolutely fine, strong, alert, alive. By sunset that same day, he'd be dead. Not in weeks.
Nobody could explain why. The strongest, healthiest young bodies were being turned into weapons against themselves, and the virus killed more humans.
So what separated the people who survived from the millions who didn't? This is the 1918 Spanish flu, rebuilt from the ground up. The science behind why before it became the worst pandemic in recorded history, it started with a sore throat. One single man. One single morning. One military camp. March 4th, 1918. Camp Funston, Kansas. A sprawling military installation where tens of thousands of young Americans were being crammed together, sleeping shoulder to shoulder, sharing mess halls. An Army cook named Albert Gitchell dragged himself to the infirmary with a headache and a burning fever. The medic wrote it down. Another cold, nothing special. By noon, over 100 soldiers reported identical symptoms. By week's end, over 500 were bedridden. Camp Funston's hospital was completely overwhelmed. But the Army's response? Keep training. Keep shipping men overseas. The war machine couldn't pause. So the Army packed sick and healthy soldiers together onto sealed troop transport ships, steel boxes with no ventilation, and sent them straight to the Western Front. They weren't just transporting soldiers. They were hand-delivering a virus to every corner of the globe. These floating incubators carried the infection to France. France spread it to Britain. Britain carried it everywhere the empire touched.
And here's the terrifying part. This first wave was the gentle one. Most patients recovered. Doctors dismissed it as seasonal flu. Nobody understood the virus was evolving, adapting, preparing to return as something far worse. September 1918. The virus came back, and it was unrecognizable. The mutated second wave didn't cause mild fevers and aches. It caused catastrophic organ failure within hours, and it arrived at the worst possible moment.
Philadelphia, September 28th. City leaders were organizing a massive Liberty Loan parade to support the war effort. Philadelphia's health director had been warned. Navy doctors were already treating hundreds with a terrifying new strain. He refused to cancel. He told the press the outbreak would be confined to its present limits. He was wrong. He was catastrophically, historically, unforgivably wrong. The parade went on. 250,000 people jammed shoulder to shoulder on Broad Street, waving flags, singing, cheering. 200,000 bodies sharing air, sharing breath, sharing a virus that was already spreading through the crowd. 72 hours later, every single hospital bed in Philadelphia was full. Within 1 week, over 4,500 Philadelphians were dead. The city's healthcare system didn't just struggle, it collapsed completely. The city morgue was built to hold 36 bodies. It was stacked with over 500. Coffin makers couldn't keep pace. Undertakers couldn't keep pace. Grave diggers couldn't dig fast enough. Bodies wrapped in bed sheets were left on front porches for days because there was literally no one available to collect them. Priests drove horse-drawn carts, calling for families to bring out their dead. A scene straight from the medieval Black Plague happening in 20th century America. Philadelphia wasn't alone. Boston, New York, San Francisco, New Orleans. The second wave hit every major city within weeks. But the strangest part of this pandemic wasn't the death toll. It was who was dying. Because this virus broke every rule that medical science had ever known about influenza. Every doctor in 1918 understood one fundamental truth about the flu. It kills the very old
and the very young. The weakest die, the strong recover. That was the rule. This virus annihilated that rule completely. It was killing healthy adults between 20 and 40, the strongest, most physically fit people in the population, at rates that defied everything medicine knew. A soldier could report a cough at morning roll call and be dead before his platoon returned from afternoon drills. Modern science now calls it a cytokine storm. Your immune system doesn't just fight the virus, it goes to war against your own body. The stronger your immune system, the more violently it overreacted. Youth became a death sentence. Strength became a vulnerability. The lungs flooded with so much fluid that patients essentially drowned from the inside. Patients turned blue, not a subtle discoloration, but a deep, dark, almost mahogany blue, as their blood lost the ability to carry oxygen. Military doctors said they had never seen anything so terrifying. And doctors had almost nothing to fight with. No antivirals, no antibiotics, no ventilators. Most didn't even know viruses existed. They believed the flu was caused by bacteria. They were fighting completely blind. So in a world stripped of almost every medical weapon we have today, what actually kept people alive? When science itself was powerless, survival came down to 5 brutal factors, and only some were within anyone's control. Factor 1. Geography. Communities that sealed their borders before the virus arrived survived almost untouched. Gunnison, Colorado, barricaded every road, quarantined every train, and banned all public gatherings immediately. Their death toll from the Spanish flu? 0. Not one single resident died. 0. Because they acted before the first case arrived, not after. Timing was everything. Factor 2. Speed of government response. St. Louis closed everything within 48 hours of its first case. Philadelphia waited 2 weeks and threw a parade. St. Louis's death rate was less than half. The math was brutal and clear. Every day of delay cost hundreds of additional lives. The cities that moved fastest buried the fewest. The ones that hesitated filled mass graves. Factor 3. Masks. San Francisco ordered mandatory gauze masks for every citizen. Were they medically perfect? No. The weave was too loose to stop individual viral particles, but they worked in other ways. They blocked larger respiratory droplets. They stopped people from touching their faces, and they served as a constant, visible reminder. Danger is real, danger is invisible, and danger is everywhere around you. Factor 4. Nursing care. Without drugs, without ventilators, survival depended on one thing: whether someone was physically present to keep you hydrated, keep your fever down, and keep you breathing through the night. Families with a dedicated caretaker, usually a mother, a wife, or a sister, who stayed day and night, saw dramatically better outcomes. Not because of medicine, because of presence, because someone refused to leave. People who lived alone died alone, often not discovered for days. The virus didn't just exploit biology, it exploited isolation. If no one came, your chances collapsed. That was the darkest math of all. Factor 5, and this was the cruelest factor of all: random biological luck. Some immune systems fought the virus without going into catastrophic overdrive. Some didn't. There was no predicting it, no preparing for it. A 22-year-old athlete could die in 8 hours. A frail 70-year-old could recover in a week. The virus exploited whatever genetic hand you were dealt. That randomness broke people psychologically. And while Americans were dying at over 10,000 per week, their own government was actively lying. The country was at war. Morale was everything. Newspapers were pressured to suppress the truth. Officials gave falsely optimistic statements. The Sedition Act made it legally dangerous to publish anything undermining public confidence. So Americans were told not to worry, while their neighbors died behind closed. Into this silence stepped the Red Cross volunteers, mostly young women, who walked directly into the worst-hit neighborhoods. They delivered food, they changed sheets, they nursed the dying when even family members were too afraid to enter. Hundreds of these volunteers caught the virus themselves. Many died. The government chose silence. These women chose courage, and their courage saved more lives than any official policy or mask mandate ever did. By mid-1919, the pandemic burned out, not because medicine conquered it, but because the virus mutated into milder forms and enough survivors carried immunity. It simply ran out of fuel. The final numbers were almost incomprehensible. 675,000 Americans dead. Worldwide, between 50 million and 100 million lives lost, in a global population of only 1.8 billion people. More than both world wars combined. More than the Black Death in absolute numbers. The single deadliest event in recorded human history. And then, something almost as remarkable as the pandemic itself happened.
The world forgot. There were no national monuments, no commemorations, no Hollywood films for decades. Survivors rarely spoke of it. Historians barely studied it. The deadliest event in modern history simply vanished.
It was buried beneath the celebrations of war's end, buried by a collective need to forget. An entire generation chose silence over memory, and the lessons died with them. Until 102 years later, another pandemic arrived, and suddenly the entire world was forced to remember something it had spent a century desperately trying to forget. The 1918 flu taught lessons humanity keeps paying full price to relearn. Act early, tell the truth, protect each other, and understand that survival sometimes depends on forces no one can control. The virus didn't care about courage or cowardice, rich or poor, young or old. It found every opening that human behavior left unguarded and walked right through. The only question is, will we remember this time?